Hey Art Nerds, we are going to be talking about the element of shape. Now, before we get too far into this video, I want you to go and check out this video. There's a link for it in the description, and it gives you sort of like a little intro about shape. Shape is the enclosure of a two-dimensional space. Okay, so shapes are flat. Shapes don't take up actual space. If I was to draw a shape on my desk, it's not going to leave me less room for all my stuff. Okay, so it is flat. It is two-dimensional, means it has length and width, but it does not have height. Okay, and when we talk about shapes, we're actually talking about two main categories of shape. First, we have one called geometric shape. And secondly, we have organic shapes. And those are two very different types of shapes. And you can really tell based on what they look like and also what it kind of makes you think of when you see those shapes. Now, for starters, we have geometric shapes. Now, geometric shapes, they have standard straight sides or regular curves. So we're thinking triangles, squares, circles, ovals, all of these different geometric shapes. I think of them as math shapes. Geometry is a math class, and that's what kind of helps me think of it. And all geometric shapes have a name. So like we have a quadrilateral, we have a trapezoid, hexagon, pentagon. So they all have names. And a lot of times there's a specific way that they are made in order for them to sort of classify as a geometric shape, okay? And keep in mind, a circle and oval are also geometric shapes, yet they don't have straight sides like the other ones. So you can't say that geometric shapes have straight sides because they can also be what we call an organic shape. Now, organic shapes, they have irregular sides and are associated with shapes found in nature. So if you take a look at some of the images on this slide, some of them may make you think of jellyfish. They might make you think of some sort of plant, a banana, a snail or a snake, a cactus. You can even have organic shapes that make you think of, a person or a hand and things like that. So organic, makes me think of organic food or things that are natural or nature shapes, okay, is a good way to sort of identify what an organic shape is. And then finally, it's not one of our two categories of shapes, but it is another type of shape that I want you to be able to recognize. And that's something called an implied shape, okay? So a shape that is implied is one that does not physically exist, but it is suggested through the psychological connection of dots, lines, areas, or their edges. So in these images below, let's take a look at the one on the far right, okay? There isn't a triangle drawn there. It's not a triangle, but based on where the black shapes start and stop, it gives us the idea, or it is suggested that it is making a triangle shape. You also have the one that we see because of the dotted lines kind of outlining it, okay? A shape has to be an enclosed space, but this is a dotted line, so it's an implied shape. So it's giving us the idea that that shape is actually there. And then with the one with the dots, might make you think of a star or a pentagon, but it's just 4 dots. So it's giving you a suggestion that that shape actually exists. So these are the 3 kind of categories of shapes. We have organic shapes, we have geometric shapes, and all shapes, have the potential of being implied. So moving on to a couple artist examples I want to share with you. The first is Henri Matisse, and he created this work in 1952, and it is actually a collage. It's not a painting, and what he did is he took a bunch of pieces of paper and layered them and arranged them into interesting, what we call a composition or an arrangement of things. And in this specific work, everything looks kind of small, but a lot of his works are very large. And in order to come up with a bunch of different ideas for it, he would tack his colored papers to the wall and then arrange it and then move things and then add things and then take some things out, trying to figure out what looked the best. So we'll actually be talking about Henri Matisse a lot as we work on our project for this lesson. Here we have Pablo Picasso, and he uses a combination of sort of geometric and organic shapes. You might see some triangles in there, ovals, and then you also see some more organic shapes. Like you see things that look like animals or people, or we got sort of like a flower in one spot. Okay, so there's a mixture of organic and geometric in his work. And Pablo Picasso created this painting in 1937. It's called Guernica, which was this sort of artistic response to the bombing of the city of Guernica in Spain, which was a huge tragedy back in the 1930s. Now, this specific work is in a style that Picasso was, very well known for creating and painting with, and that is called Cubism. And we kind of connect that with the thought of a cube, which is a three-dimensional square. So the Cubism usually correlates with a lot of shapes being used and abstracted images and ideas. So it doesn't look just like a horse or look just like a person, but it uses some simplified shapes and gestures to create the illusion of those figures within the artwork. So he makes some really interesting work here in a Cubism style. Thirdly, we have this work by Iphmondrian in 1929. Mondrian used traditionally white, black, red, blue, and yellow paint, and that'd be like all that he would ever use. You Google this artist and you'll find hundreds of just images of artworks that are just in these colors, and they look very similar because he uses only rectangles and squares with thick black lines in between each of them. And it is sort of his style. So if it looks similar to this one that we have on the slide, it's probably a Mondrian painting. And what is also very interesting is it looks like a very simple painting, but if you've ever tried to paint a perfectly straight line and change from red to black or from black to white without having anything blended in between, it's actually really hard. So very interesting artist, very unique style using geometric shapes. And lastly, we have this work by Alexander Calder, and he created this work in 1971. It is a freestanding sculpture. It's probably about as tall as you are. So it's a fairly tall piece, and it is a kinetic sculpture, or we also sometimes call it a mobile. If you take a look at the top, at the point of it, there's a wire that stretches across of it, and then at the end of pieces of the wire are these giant metal shapes, and they are perfectly balanced, these shapes are. And to keep it so that you don't have one side tipping over the other. They're perfectly balanced based on the size and the shape of the piece of metal that has been attached to it, which is really interesting about how he's incorporating these, sort of like rounded geometric shapes to create something interesting around the top half of this sculpture. And another thing that I find really interesting is the fact that this sculpture has like 3 legs. It gives the illusion that, it could be something that could actually move, even though we know it's made out of metal and it's not going to move. There's no motor or anything, but it still makes a really interesting piece to look at. So I want you to pause and take a look at this video, also in the description, and it's about Henri Matisse. And it's going to be walking you through a really cool gallery showing of a lot of his work. And you'll find a little bit more about his life, about his process, and what makes his work really unique. So that's all I have for you about the element of shape. Stay tuned for more information and more videos.